Over the past year, Week in One has brought you some of the top stories covered by our reporters and anchors. In this special edition, we take a look at some of the news highlights of 2022. I'm Shridika Pillay. Let's get into it. In the month of July, a spate of violent tavern shootings rocked Gauteng. Police are still battling to find the criminals responsible, while affected communities say they live in fear. eNCA senior reporter Senzo Meyiwa compiled this report.
From Gauteng in the east of Johannesburg to Lenasia, Garankuwa in Pretoria and Nomzamo in Soweto, more than 20 people have been shot dead in tavern attacks. In Nomzamo, 16 people were shot and killed execution style, and residents there say they still live in fear.
Next, my police. Baboni ukuthi obani oresizwe bayayisuka phela into abayenza babethunywe ubani
sibiza nje ukuthi akathi bangabantu labantu bonke bavele ngaphambi ukuthi yini akahle abayifuna abantwini ngoba lento ubulwane lento asiyazi la emzansi ukuthi vele kubulawa abantu bengenza lutho nje kahle kahle
wathembisa undosi ukuthi labantu sebeyabazi.
They have sent me the names, the list of names. They have sent me the photos of those guys. Said I don't want photos, I don't want names, I want those guys. So I've asked Mawela, they say they are close.
It's been days since the statement from the police minister, and there's still no signs of any arrests.
Politicians must be careful what they say about these crime scenes and not get people's hopes up. You need to manage expectations. I think that's important. One must be careful to pressure the police to have swift arrests in these very complex crimes, because then they are seen to just arrest without proper evidence. People are released, and then, it seems like no justice is done.
When asked for comment, police officials sent a message saying the provincial office would make an announcement when there's a breakthrough on the tavern shootings. Senzo Meyiwa, Johannesburg.
Every week, we look not only at all of the major stories covered by our reporters, but we also feature the significant interviews done on some of our shows as they drive forward the news agenda. One such interview took place during the ANC policy conference. eNCA's Professor Jagersfontein hosted a robust panel discussion on his show Power to Truth in the build-up to the conference and touched on some burning issues.
There seems to be a resistance on step aside. Also, on another end, it seems like the step aside, at least according to the perception of some of the branches, is being used as a political machete of some sort.
Let's start here. The issue, branches are free to raise their issues. They will come to conference. They will engage, because you would have even other provinces who are firm to say, we support the step-aside rule. So there is those, so there's a balance. There's those that understand the importance of the step-aside rule in terms of ensuring that we have a moral standing in society as an organization so that we can remove this label of corruption from the ANC. So that's important. So there is contestation of debate. As always it happens. We'll go there and debate it, but it is necessary. You can't have in the same sentence talking about renewal of the organization, but you say you don't want step aside.
Step aside,
it can't be in the same. In the same. Maybe let me come to the issue. Let me just conclude in this way, JJ. And similarly, in terms of the issues around our structures, where people are saying, people will have to read what we say. It's very clear. It's not saying when you are alleged as a person. It's saying the minute you appear before a court,
when you
are indicted, and maybe you go out on bail or you remain in custody. That's where you must.
Those branches are saying that that resolution mutated since 2017. That's not how it read, and it has now been mutated to say charged instead of implicated.
Remember the resolution, what the conference said is that the NEC must go and ensure that there's integrity commission that will
develop guidelines.
So that's the mandate. It was broad mandate.
Okay.
The NEC then went and said, how do we deal with it? Even in terms of that, by the way, the step-aside rule even says there must be a review, because there were discussions around what happens if I'm charged for 20 years. And I never get, because people were fearing this.
It's only in the category of Zuma to be charged for 20 years.
It was discussed in the NEC, and the resolution there is very clear to say we'll review every NEC member or whoever that is indicted and stepped aside have a right to come back and review to say, but look at this, nothing has happened.
All right, let me give Prof a chance there, because I believe if you are charged for 20 years and your case continues for 20 years, like Jacob's, we must step aside for the whole time, because otherwise it defeats the purpose of stepping aside. But Prof, what's your view there?
Well, the step aside.
Is it a convincing thing, this step aside thing, as a way in which the ANC is, in a sense, clinching back on integrity?
Look, I don't want to belabor that, because as far as I'm concerned, it has been stepped aside. It's inconsequential.
Why do you say that?
It will never ever be materialized in any way, because the pushback is very strong. Look, for me, the ANC is so fractured that it cannot save itself from itself. I've said it then, I can repeat ad nauseum. It has reached a stage where, if it loses power, it is very likely to remain with bona fide members that can resuscitate it, renew it. But at the current moment, with the current discourse, with the so-called tripartite alliance, forget about the ANC redeeming itself.
The sentencing of the mastermind behind Tsegofatso Phule's murder, Ntutuko Shoba, made news in July. He was found guilty of murdering his then-pregnant girlfriend in June of 2020. She was found hanging from a tree in Durban Deep in Rudaport. eNCA's Slindelo Masikane has the story.
Mr. Shoba was the driving force behind the scheme and has done nothing since Ms. Phule's murder to merit the kind of leniency that Mr. Malapane received. Mr. Makabela did not identify any other factor that would justify a departure from the statutory penalty. He drew my attention to the year or so that Mr. Shoba has spent in pre-trial incarceration, but accepted that this could not on its own justify a departure from that penalty. Mr. Shoba, can you stand up, please? For all these reasons, Mr. Shoba, I am enjoined by the statute to apply the ordinary sentence for an offence of this nature. You will spend the rest of your natural life in prison unless the parole authorities consider you fit for release in the fullness of time. Accordingly, on count 1 of the indictment, I sentence you to life imprisonment. You may sit down. Thank you. Is there anything further, Mr. Mohammed? Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. The court will adjourn.
All right.
The brutal gang rape of 8 women in Krugersdorp sent shockwaves across the country. The women were part of a team filming a music video near a disused mine dump. eNCA's Nqobile Madlala compiled this report.
Civil society is demanding swift action and punishing those involved in Krugersdorp gang rape. Unions like the General Industry Workers Union of SA says mining communities must be made part of this economy to mitigate the dangerous underworld of illegal mining. Organizations against gender-based violence say the focus needs to be on helping the women whose lives will never be the same.
It is shocking, it is appalling that in the eve of Women's Month, we are faced with such an ordeal. I mean, we're talking 8 young souls. We're talking between the ages of 18 and 35 years old.
We need to look into all these mines. We need to look at these dumping areas. Who are running these dumping areas? Who are the bosses in those dumping areas?
Our policing needs to be stringent. It needs to be venomous as quickly as possible so that communities can feel safe again.
We do think that is a crime that must be dealt with very harshly. We think that there must be arrests, there must be prosecution, and people that are involved in that must be, sentenced heavily.
Police Minister Bheki Cele says investigators have collected strong evidence.
We have requested our laboratories to fast-track the DNA evidence that was collected so that we are able to link is exactly what we want to do. Collecting these 84, how many, whatever 80 men is not helping us.
In the wake of the attack, police swarmed in the area and arrested over 8 people on a variety of charges. They are expected to appear in Krugersdorp Magistrate Court on Monday. Nqobile Madlala, Alexandra.
The smouldering tensions between Kagiso residents on the West Rand and the Zamazamas erupted shortly after the story broke. Angry Kagiso residents mobilized themselves in their thousands and apprehended several illegal miners themselves. eNCA senior reporter Aviu Mtila broke the story as it unfolded.
Our pilot takes us now inside these shacks here, where these community members are. It looks like from where we are situated, they're trying to root out the illegal miners as they're literally going inside every inch of Kagiso and trying to take out whatever zamazamas they have. As you can see, there's another dozen, or well, more than a dozen or so there on the ground, also moving around, as we've literally seen the police come in some 2 or so minutes ago. They're now converging in this spot here inside the shacks of Kagiso, as we're going to try then trek back as we hover above the shacks, trying to track back then to the bushes. Earlier on, we saw concerning scenes, colleague, of about a dozen naked zamazamas, we'd assume, that were being marched through the bushes there. And they were being beaten by shamboks, nobkiris, with at least 100 or so members from the community of Kagiso marching with them. We saw them being beaten by the community members as they were being marched to this very place. They're now lying flat on their stomachs on the ground. They're not sure what is going to happen to them, as of course we're seeing from this distance. For years now, they've been terrorized by zamazamas who have gone beyond the illegality of mining illegally here, and they've gone to terrorize the community themselves. So they said that they've had enough, and for the majority of the morning, they've been out on the streets in their hundreds, colleague. Different pockets that we've seen literally march around here. Now we've seen them circulating these at least 12 zamazamas, with one that was left behind unconsciously. The situation from a bird's eye view, as we are giving you right from Kagiso in the West Rand area, as the community say they've had enough of being terrorized by illegal miners.
One of the big interviews featured on Weekend One in the month of August was regarding the ANC Renewal Commission, which has been calling for a 40% representation of youth in the NEC. Fasia Hassan spoke to eNCA anchor Masego Rahlaga about why it is important for young people to be at the forefront of the renewal process.
I did hear you guys clap your hands on Friday when the president opened the policy conference. As soon as he mentioned young people, he actually said 50%. If I'm not mistaken.
No, thanks, Masego. 50%, anything above 40. So remember, 40 for us is the minimum. It's not the ceiling. In fact, we want 40% plus. And it's a very important position that we need to put forward, both as the Youth League and as young people in the mass democratic movement. You know, the reality is the majority of the population is under the age of 35. And so our leadership structure should reflect that. In fact, if we were being more statistical, we'd call for 60% of youth representation. But we're in a space where we're really building from something, we're growing, but more importantly, we are really putting our foot down, and we're saying we as young people must enter into the leadership structures, but also into the decision-making spaces, not just of the party, but also of the state.
And in terms of how the NEC of the ANC looks right now, what is the percentage, what is the ratio right now?
It's extremely low. The majority of the NEC is probably over the age of 50. I'd have to check for specific statistics, but we're not even talking 40%. We're talking 20% at most. And even that, I don't think there's a single person who's under the age of 35 in the current NEC. And that's why December is so important to us as young people.
The month of September had a host of top stories. One of the biggest in this period was when a dam wall collapsed in Jagersfontein in the Free State. It left hundreds of people displaced, at least one person dead and 4 missing. The company that owns the mine dam says it will take responsibility for the collapse. eNCA's Mangoba Mkunu was on that story as it developed.
A sobering picture of the devastating flood of sludge that hit Jagersfontein on Sunday. Houses collapsed and livelihoods were destroyed. This video by one of the residents showing the destructive path of the torrent. Over 300 people have been evacuated, but the big question is, who is to blame?
JDP includes full responsibility for community of Jagersfontein, and even Ronabamo affected, but the whole community of Jagersfontein are affected. There is no water because of Johan.
And the Mineral Resources Minister agrees.
The slimes dam belong to the mine, not the department. And therefore, at the time it said, TPS is the owner. So whoever owns it now is a legal successor to TPS. Therefore, they will take responsibility.
But asked why his department failed to intervene, Mantashe had this to say.
In 2007, in December, TPS took us to court, okay? And the judgment by Justice Kruger and Justice Beckley was that a slimes dam here and all other slimes dams are falling outside the MRA. And the MPRDA has no jurisdiction over them. In other words, this operation was taken out of our department.
Meanwhile, the company responsible for operations has refuted claims that there was gross negligence on its part.
We need to have that investigation done, and we can't speculate at this stage. That's the worst thing we can do. So let's all wait for that to get finalized, and it might take time, but we have to wait for that.
The company says it has appointed an independent team to investigate. Government has already launched a formal inquiry. Jagersfontein, Free State.
Johannesburg City Council meetings of late have descended into chaos. In his show Power to Truth, Professor J.J. Tavern brought the two warring parties into the same room and hosted a much-needed debate between Joburg Mayor Phala Phala and ANC Johannesburg caucus leader Dada Morero.
At the moment, they are totally hopeless. They need to be removed from office in order for you to implement that plan.
Look, JJ, there's no secret about the fact that the DA has no interest in Johannesburg except to collapse it.
Why would they want to collapse it?
And the politics are in relation, and I'll give you the politics because we need to accept that there's also politics at play. Johannesburg has always occupied the #1 space in political affairs of the world or any other issues, including on successes and so on and so on. Now, that is why she then says, by the way, she was in Cape Town last weekend, there was no load shedding. But she doesn't know that the document that she has presented around issues of energy is a document produced by us and left on the table. When she arrived, she got that document. 2, she's not alive to the fact that, in fact, when we're in power, there was no load shedding in Johannesburg. There was no load shedding. City Power ensured that once Eskom, in fact, Eskom ended up buying excess electricity from the city of Johannesburg. The facts are there, you can call Eskom. They will tell you, yes, we used to even buy from Johannesburg because we were clear that the lights must be on in Johannesburg. It's an economic hub.
All right.
So that it doesn't affect the economy.
Let's get her perspective now. Mayor, there seems to be a gap between what the ANC says they left in place and what you are experiencing now. And he's lumping you now to say you're also part of the Mashaba administration. You guys were in 2016, and whenever you left 2019, you messed up the city. In other words, you reversed the successes that they had put in place before you came in.
I honestly don't know where to start when there are so many untruths, in what he has just said. I really don't know which one to address first.
Just address any that comes to mind.
So first he says they put together the GDS, the Growth and Development Strategy, you said 2012?
Around 2012,
2012, yes. And he says one of the resolutions was that they must address the infrastructure backlog. 2012. They took over in 1994. They took over a stable city. They took over infrastructure that was working for the residents of Johannesburg, infrastructure that was maintained. There was budget year on year for repairs and maintenance. They stopped doing that when they took over. They did not think that infrastructure must be maintained. That backlog came as a result of their poor governance and really having no clue how to run a city from 1994. And that's why in 2012, after they had caused that damage, they saw it fit to start talking about how they now fix that damage. The DA was not in power then. So I think he's just contradicted himself. Yes, I still go back to 1995. They had just taken over. They had not had the time that they've now had to destroy this city. They had just taken over, and there was still a semblance of order and functionality in Johannesburg. But over the years, you and I know we are residents of Johannesburg. You cannot lie to us about our lived experiences. You cannot tell me there was no load shedding in the last 2 years when the ANC was in power, when you were experiencing load shedding in your house. So, you know, some things really, I think our residents can hear for themselves that they've been taken for a ride.
Also in the month of September, police investigated 10 murders after the bodies of men believed to be Zamazamas were found near Bosmont in Johannesburg. eNCA's Pule Lechwiti Jones covered this breaking story.
Gruesome scenes with bodies lying around in the open veld near an old mine near Bosmont in Johannesburg. An eyewitness alleges that community members from Bosmont went on a rampage to get rid of Zamazamas in their area, who they believe are the cause of crimes in their community.
I live in the Bosmont community, it's old Bosmont, opposite the cemetery. Now in the cemetery is a little hill, just opposite Highgate, China Mall at the moment. There were 5 Zamazamas standing on top of the hill because that is the hole that they go into, the mine that they actually mine in. That mine probably comes right out till about this area, yeah. Then 1 minute I saw the 5 standing on top of the hill. I looked to the left, there was a stream of people running along the train lines along the graveyard. They were not 20 or 30 people, they were about 100 people. And then I looked back at the Zamazamas and they started running away from that mine, and those people started chasing them, and then gunshots started coming. They ran obviously on the back of the graveyard, along the sloot, along all the back houses of Bosman, and they were hunted down by that particular community of people. There must have been 120 of them that were shooting at those Zamazamas, and they clearly came to hunt them down, to close that mine. Because basically in Bosman, when we sleep at night, we hear gunshots every night, you know, Bosman. Between the hours of 10 o'clock the night till about 4 o'clock the morning. That's basically what we live through. But it appears to be that they decided that everyone's tired of this particular occurrences and they took them out. And that's how it looks according to me.
Police are investigating the matter.
At this stage, we do not know what the motive is. The bodies are confirmed to have gunshot wounds, but we will be investigating cases of murder, 6 counts of murder, and then the motive will be determined. But we can say that with information that we have received, that these people that have died are confirmed to be, are suspected to be Zamazamas in the area.
Bosman community members are calling on Police Minister Bekele to deploy more officers in the area. Pule Lechwiti Jones in Johannesburg.
Enough is enough. That has been the growing sentiment of angry community leaders in Eldorado Park, who say over 10 people were gunned down in just a week. They've been calling for urgent government and police intervention to curb the current spate of gang and drug-related killings plaguing the community. eNCA senior reporter Aviwe Mtila was there.
A coffin to symbolize the 13 lives that were gunned down in Eldorado Park over the last week. Lloyd Leisegang's 2 sons are among those that were shot in a drive-by shooting.
Unfortunately and painfully to say, I lost my youngest son. And his brother, he's doing well, he's recovering. As well as another friend of theirs is also recovering, he's back home now. And a few other friends who were injured during this ordeal. And as a parent, you know, it's sad to say that we've been held hostage. Our freedom has been robbed. And we'd like to get back to normality.
Since Monday night, the community has been camping outside the Eldorado police station, demanding that the guns be silenced.
13 shootings in 2 weeks, that explains itself. Monday morning, we had a protest on Sunday. Monday morning, we had another death. We buried two gunned down boys on Sunday. We were standing in the main road, closing the main road, having a guard of honor. And yes, Monday morning again. So it shows that policing in the area needs to be beefed up.
Because SAPS doesn't want to be out there in the community, we will come to SAPS so that we feel protected. So we have been camping out here since Monday. Our campaign then ends tomorrow. It ends tomorrow and we move on to phase 2 of the campaign.
100 Johannesburg Metro Police Department officers have been deployed to Eldorado Park for the next 3 months.
We will never win crime on ourselves because we are working with SAPS, were appointed in terms of the SAPS Act, but then the most important people is the community. These people who are carrying guns, the community knows them. It's their children, their cousins, and everybody else. So they know them. So they must come out and say that, yes, these are the people who are doing it.
The community is vowed to shut down Eldorado Park by Friday if their list of demands, which includes the axing of the station commander here, are not met by Thursday midnight. Aviwem Tila, Eldorado Park, Johannesburg.
This month was also marked with the implementation of Stage 6 power cuts in an attempt to avert the collapse of the national grid. The City of Johannesburg said it can't rely on Eskom anymore and plans to switch to City Power's own electricity generation measures. eNCA's senior reporter, Aviwe Mtila, has the story for us.
One of the substations around Johannesburg that have blown up over the weekend due to overloading post-load shedding that have left many communities in the dark. Now, this just only adds fuel to the frustrations that many people around Johannesburg have over load shedding.
I'm more productive at home. This is horrible. We can't have load shedding during peak hours. No, honestly.
This is like an actual economy disaster area because businesses just want to close shop because they're struggling to survive and make ends meet.
Losing production while you lose money. You got people sitting here supposed to be working with the hand machines, with electricity. Now, when there isn't enough electricity, then all that comes to a standstill.
This is just one of the holes that the acting CEO of City Power says the Zamazamas are using in their illegal operations. Now, here at the Roodepoort substation alone, 3.5 million rands worth of cables were stolen over the weekend, which has left many communities without power for at least 3 days here.
Cable thieves were able to get into the substation during load shedding and steal the cables. So we are facing all these dynamics, and of course our residents have to suffer, our businesses have to suffer. We understand the problem that our residents have to face. So we are saying by the end of this year, December 2022, our residents and customers will begin to feel the difference as we start to onboard IPPs and feed more electricity into the grid. We do understand there are many good men and women within Eskom that's trying to do work, but simply we cannot rely on Eskom anymore.
As City Power, City of Johannesburg, government as well as Eskom scramble to grapple with load shedding, it's the South African economy and its people that continue to suffer the most. Aviwem Tila, Johannesburg.
This month was also marred by the tragic deaths of 20 people in a horror crash on the N2 near Pongola, 19 of whom were children. The community has been calling for interventions for years as the route has become notorious for truck-related accidents. eNCA's senior reporter, Desan Tatia, covered the court case of the driver who opted not to apply for bail for fear of his safety.
A lot can happen in a week. In the past 7 days, Pongola residents have seen a number of government ministers, MECs, portfolio committees and other authorities descend on the area. This comes after a horrific crash in which 18 school pupils died as well as 2 other adults. But what's also changed is the mind of Sibusiso Siyaya. He's the man who was driving the truck that crashed into that bakkie that was carrying those school children. Just last week, he confidently had said in court that he intended to apply for bail. But now in court, he's changed his mind and abandoned that bail bid. Represented privately, no reasons were given for him abandoning that bail bid. Outside court, community members, including the families of some of those victims, were here to sign a petition saying that they did not want Siyaya to get bail. They were relieved after the decision was made in court.
He must allow the court to proceed and charge him because I know he's innocent until proven guilty, but he knows very well that he made a mistake. And the families, when they keep on coming here, we continue being angry. This thing, because it has happened, and we are trying to heal ourselves in this process, and it should get into the end, and we start a new page in life.
The matter has been adjourned until the 25th of October for further investigations. Siaya will remain in custody until then. I'm Desan Dathia in Pongola, KwaZulu-Natal.
We've been served with divorce papers. That powerful statement coming from ANC chairperson Gwede Mantashe on the sidelines of the 14th Cosatu Congress in Midrand. He would be rejected by delegates who refused to be addressed by him for a second day in a row. Slindelo Masikane crossed live to eNCA anchor Dan Moyane as the story unfolded.
Gwede Mantashe was actually about to address the Congress as an alliance partner. However, as soon as he was announced to go to the podium, delegates then started chanting, Asina Mali, Asina Mali. We can see that Mantashe has essentially been led back to his seat. He is sitting next to some other members here. We can see Lindiwe Zulu. It seems that there's a scuffle going on. We're all trying to understand exactly what the workers want to happen with Mantashe right now. Do they want him to leave completely? Will he be allowed to actually address the delegates at this point? We don't know.
Can you leave him for now? He will talk to you at the right time.
Delegates are expressing themselves, it's allowed.
They are trying to get people to cool down, calm down, to try and, arrest the situation. Let's just put our mic in here. Mantashe, how are you feeling? Okay, Brother, I'm trying, but I don't think we're going to get a word in from the ANC chair right now.
If it's not rolling blackouts, then it's cable theft and vandalism that Joburg residents are subjected to. Authorities say they're working around the clock to get a handle on the problem. eNCA anchor Tumelo Mototwane spoke to Sergeant Tela, General Manager of Security Services at City Power.
How big of a problem is this?
The problem is very huge. If you look at statistics, as an example, the whole of last year, took the financial year, we had 1,899 incidents. Well, that was 2021. And last year, we've seen an increase of around about 15% of those incidents. They went up to 2,176. So on average, on a daily basis, we are looking at around about 9 to 10 incidents.
Have you found that, the criminals, the perpetrators become more and more sophisticated each time you think that you found a strategy to resolve the problem?
When the blanket of nightness come in, load shedding, then that's when the criminals have got the field work. And they can just go from one point to the other. And what I've seen quite recently is that they also monitor the load shedding schedule to say if a specific area is down, then they move to that particular area, they harvest it, then they move to the other area. But we're of the view that I think there is some other insider threats, if I were to call it like
What kind of insider threat?
Insider threat, well, it could potentially be people who are quite very familiar with our network. They know how our network operates. We've looked at the modus operandi, and you move from one mini substation to the other. You start to realize to say, look, the person who have vandalized this mini substation yesterday is the same person who vandalized it today.
One of the other big interviews featured on Week in One this year was when eNCA's Tumelo Mototwane and Gareth Edwards spoke to DA Council Federal Chairperson Helen Ziller. They touched on a range of issues and challenges that South Africans are currently facing.
Yesterday we had our viewer question on this ministerial handbook. I just want to get your thoughts on this, because then we've seen the statement which says, to my mind, really nothing else. We're still paying, or taxpayers are paying for ministers' power and water.
Well, it is a complete outrage that in South Africa, where people live every day without power, and in Johannesburg without water, ministers are shielded from the experience of the people they're supposed to represent. They wouldn't know what load shedding is because load shedding avoids the areas where ministers are, and they always have generators or whatever else they do. And then, to add insult to injury, to have the taxpayers pay their electricity costs and pay their water costs is, as I said, insult to injury. That is where that saying comes from.
If the DA could have it its way, if they were in power, how would they handle such perks by ministers?
Well, what we did when I came in as Premier of the Western Cape is we really pared down the Ministerial handbook. On cars, on blue lights, on you name it. We pared it right down. And I thought that that was the right thing to do. I never had a luxury car. What I drove around in was something from the government fleet. It was an old Kombi, because a Kombi was good so that when I had to go around to meetings with various people who had to accompany me, like different MECs or different experts or officials to answer questions on the goings-on that people were interested in, we could all go in one car, one Kombi, and not put 5 cars on the road, that sort of thing. And that's what you do. You literally are a servant of the people.
One of the big court stories in this month was the urgent bail application by accused number 2 in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. Bongani Ntanzi's lawyer believes that exceptional circumstances exist for him to be released, and the 32-year-old maintains he's being framed for the soccer star's death. eNCA senior reporter Senzo Meyiwa was in court.
Bongani Ntanzi has spent the past 2 years behind bars. He's now applying for bail and believes exceptional circumstances exist for his release.
The state will know where to find the applicant. As the witness testified that the applicant is from Nongoma and the directions were given. Furthermore, when the applicant was arrested, he was arrested at a place of employment. He was employed by that time.
The 32-year-old maintains he's being framed for Meyiwa's death. Ntanzi has alleged that police tortured him to get a confession and for him to implicate his co-accused. But the state says Ntanzi may evade trial if released.
When the applicant was interviewed, he mentioned that he was at work when the incident occurred on the 26th of October 2014, and the statement of his supervisor at Sibanye Stillwater Mines, Mr. Hendrik Louis Mulder, was obtained. And Mr. Mulder refuted that the applicant was at work on the 26th of October 2014 when the incident occurred. And the question, my lord, would be, why would he want to create the impression that he was at work when the deceased was killed on the 26th of October 2014 at Foslores? We submit, my lord, that that is a pointer of his guilt.
Ntanzi's brother, who testified on his behalf, says they're hopeful Ntanzi's application will be granted. Judgment has been reserved. Meanwhile, the trial itself is expected to resume in November, with Tumelo Madlala back in the witness box for cross-examination. Senzo Meyiwa, Pretoria.
Probably one of the biggest stories for this year, which happened in December, was when MPs voted on whether the findings of the Section 89 report into the theft at the President's Phala Phala farm should be adopted by Parliament. Needless to say, there was a heated debate preceding the vote in the National Assembly.
Yes, those who have voted yes, 148, and those who have voted no, 214. Abstained, hold on, honorable members. Abstention 2. And therefore, the Section 89(1) inquiry will therefore not be proceeded with.
The other top story in the month of December has been the floods in Gauteng. Torrential downpours across the province have caused damage to infrastructure and left many people stranded. The South African Weather Service says the disruptive rain is expected to continue. eNCA's Mangoba Mkunu reports.
With more rains expected across Gauteng, emergency services are on high alert.
We are in contact with the South African Weather Services and we're working hand in hand with disaster management. If we receive any flooding alerts, we'll be able to alert the people, especially those that are around the low-lying areas.
Several parts of Joburg have been battered by floods, which has left dozens of people stranded. According to emergency services, there are several priorities now.
We have been told that it will rain throughout the week. We have put teams in place. This is in all districts from Soweto, Ivory Park, Midrand, Alexandra, just to ensure that in case of any emergency, we'll be able to respond.
City power has also been left scrambling as large parts of the city have been plunged into darkness.
We're dealing with about 5,000 outage calls since this morning across Johannesburg, from customers across Johannesburg, most of those in Rudeport, Lenasia, and even Hestiel, Auckland Park area. And those are some of the areas basically where we've seen the hotspots of the flash flooding and obviously these thunderstorms.
Several roads remain closed after being damaged by flood waters.
In Rudeport, Albertina Sisulu Road, that's next Florida Lake, has been closed off, and this is due to flooding and structural damage. And there's also Kilburn Street in Discovery. It's also due to structural damage and where a sinkhole has developed. So it's extremely important for members of public and especially motorists to be aware of those areas.
In Soweto, residents are trying to pick up the pieces. Meanwhile, authorities are assessing the damage as they roll out their response plan. Mangoba Mchunu, Johannesburg.
Without a shadow of doubt, one of the biggest stories this year has been the ANC's 55th National Conference in Nasrec. South Africans waited with bated breath for the outcome in light of the controversial Phala Phala report, which has threatened to put the state president's presidency at risk. Despite all of these woes, President Cyril Ramaphosa has once again reigned supreme and was re-elected as the governing party's president. Let's recap on that moment.
I could not even make out that number as the crowd once more erupted with glee. I mean, sounds of joy as they heard that it's more than 2,000 votes for President Cyril Ramaphosa. He's remaining in place in his position as the president of the African National Congress. I think it's a national elective conference. The party is entrusting him to take charge, 70-year-old, and to lead the party to those 2024 elections. And now we're hearing former President Kgalema Motlanthe calling for the crowd to just calm down as they are supposed to proceed, of course, with now the pronouncement of the deputy presidency. There, we know the current Treasurer General well just been dissolved.
Everyone in the ANC is expected to fall in line and stand behind the elected leadership of the ANC. That's the word from ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa, who delivered the closing remarks at the party's 55th National Elective Conference. He says there have been attempts to sow division within the party.
There have, yes, been attempts to divide us, to provoke us, and to divert us from the tasks that we must undertake in advancing our national democratic revolution. There have been moments at this conference that have tested our unity and cohesion. But I can testify to the fact that this conference is going to continue solidifying our unity and our cohesion as the African National Congress. And thanks to the political consciousness, and for the most part, the discipline amongst yourselves as delegates, in that whatever differences amongst us that we may have had, these did not distract us from the critical work that the people of this country expect and require of us. The branches have spoken by choosing the leadership that will emerge from here. That is the way of democracy in the African National Congress. And once the branches have made their choice, all of us are expected to fall in line and embrace and accept the decisions that have been taken here.
And that's it for this very special edition of the Best of Weekend One. From myself, Shridika Pillay, and the team, happy holidays.